I've been pretty hesitant, nervous, trepidatious, you might say, about doing this episode because it's just so much to say about Jerry Lewis. I didn't want this thing to be too long. I hope it's not. There's so much material, and but you know, here we are anyways. And let me start by saying, as I am required to legally, this is the Kazdoy Closet. I'm Kazdoy. This is not my closet full of all the stuff that I love. This is the Kazdoy kitchen because I have so much stuff on the table here to show you. I needed easy access to it. But today, we're celebrating 250 subscribers. Now I know for a lot of YouTube channels, that's not a whole lot. Some have thousands, some have millions. But I appreciate everyone who subscribed to this. So first of all, a toast to you. This is my excuse for drinking. Here's the official Kazdoy Closet shot glass, courtesy of super nieces Emma and Kate. Yeah, I wimped out a little bit, but I've already had a couple. This is, in case you're wondering, Jameson Black Barrel Triple Distilled Irish Whiskey. Very good. So I want to do something special for the 250 subscribers. And about 2 months ago, I did a episode about this pretty recent box set, Jerry Lewis at Columbia, with two of his more minor films, The Big Mouth and Hook, Line, and Sinker. You can look that episode up. And it got a pretty decent response. So I thought, all right, I'm going to do my full Jerry collection. I'm not going to address his flawed personality, the controversy surrounding him, the telethon. That would be a really long episode, and I just want to focus on his films. Why do I like his films? First of all, I think he has impeccable comic timing. I think his mugging is lightning fast. Sometimes there's a mugging expression that I think is a little bit too juvenile, but another one's coming along in 2 seconds, so why not? And then I think his skills as a physical comedian are fantastic, up there with the best for sure. And you know, some of these guys, they get into a lot of pain from doing a lot of physical comedy and end up having trouble with painkillers, but that's another topic. I think he had a problem with that too. I really enjoy how Jerry can take the easiest tasks, like opening a door, or carrying packages, or making orange juice, or sitting in a chair, or even just walking, and make it funny, prolong it to an absurd extreme. Not many comic actors can do that, and he does it really well. He can even drive funny. I always like when there's one guy in a film acting totally insane, and everybody else in the film, in the same scene, is just stone-faced and staring at him and not laughing. If you laugh at him, that ruins the whole thing. But Groucho Marx knew that, Laurel and Hardy knew that, a lot of these other guys knew that. Jerry Lewis does that great. I love when he's acting crazy and everybody else is just kind of staring at him. All of the films I want to talk about today have great moments in them. Some have more great moments, and that's why I gave them a higher rating. So let's look at the films and let's check them out. What I'd like to do is start with the more minor Jerry films and move on to his best work. So the first few are going to be, I'm going to give 3 stars out of 5 to these first 2 films, starting with The Delinquent. This is from 1957. This is Jerry's first film without Dean Martin. Now, let me just say as a side note, personally, I was never a fan of the Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis films. I was never a fan of their act. I don't really care for Jerry's The Kid character. I think he's a little too juvenile and just grating. I like his persona and his other films better. And I know Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis were phenomenally successful until they broke up in 1956, but that's a whole other story. So I like Jerry's films solo. Delinquent is about is sort of cashing in on the juvenile delinquent craze, and then he is a kid who is mistaken for a juvenile delinquent, and a cop takes him under his wing and wants to reform him. The cop is played by Darren McGavin. He's good as usual. There's no other actors really of note in here, no funny actors. even serious funny actors, if you know what I mean. And Jerry has some really good moments in here. The tone is way off. He did not write or direct this one. I think that could be part of the problem. The tone is way off. It should be more consistently funny. Jerry's funny. Darren McGavin probably is in half the scenes. That's a mistake. Jerry sings a serious song. That's a big mistake. But I'm still going to give it a generous 3 stars because of the Jerry moments. Next up is another 3-star film, being generous. That's The Disorderly Orderly from 1964. Again, he did not write or direct this one. He is a young man who wants to be a doctor, but he's too squeamish. He becomes an orderly, and hijinks ensue again. This is one of those films where I think he wants to be a leading man, which is a big mistake. You know, the comic guys in these films should always be sort of the losers or the outcasts. They shouldn't really want to fit in like that. But he has his moments, just like he usually does. And again, like the Delinquent Delinquent, it can get a little too sentimental, a little too maudlin. When Jerry gets too sentimental and maudlin, it gets a little cringy, but we're going to forgive him for that. Let's move on to 4-star films. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Cinderella, and that's from 1960. This was written and directed by Frank Tashlin, good director who worked with Jerry a couple times. This is a riff on the Cinderella story. Jerry is the Cinderella figure. His fairy godfather is by the great comic actor Ed Wynn. Who else is in this? We have Henry Silva, who was in a lot of gangster films, very serious actor, and he's playing it serious here. That's really funny to see him playing it serious. And Count Basie shows up with his band as well. This has some moments where it gets a little sentimental sometimes. It has a great sequence of Jerry trying to make orange juice. That's hilarious. And also when he's serving his stepmother and his stepbrother's dinner on this long table, and he has to walk back and forth. It goes on forever. It's hilarious. So I like Cinderella. It gets a little theatrical here and there, but it's okay. It's a good one. I'm going to give it 4 stars. Next one for 4 stars, The Ladies' Man. This is from 1961. I think all the ones from here on in are written and directed by Jerry. Sometimes his co-writer was actually, every time was Bill Richmond, who shows up in some of these films too. The Ladies' Man is about a guy that Jerry plays who got dumped by his girlfriend. He decides he's done with women, and of course he gets a job at an all-female boarding house. This is pretty famous for its set, which was this massive set, I think the biggest one ever made at the time, that shows the entire boarding house and each level, and he goes up and down each level. Pretty interesting, and there's a little extra on here about that. All these that I'm showing you right now are DVDs, and I'll get into where you can see them later. But they all have commentaries by Jerry and usually by Steve Lawrence, the singer, for some reason. I don't know why. I didn't really listen to any of them. And it has some archival footage, maybe some back stuff off the scene, footage, archival footage, whatever you want to call it, and some outtakes and stuff like that. So Ladies' Man's a pretty good one. Another 4-star one, The Patsy. The Patsy is about a singer who dies, and I guess Jerry's his lookalike, so the managers put him in his place to pretend he's the singer. Jerry's just a hotel employee. And listen to this cast. This includes Everett Sloane, Phil Harris, Keenan Wynn, Peter Lorre, John Carradine. Another woman I want to mention who shows up in a lot of these films is Kathleen Freeman, great comic actor. You might not know the name, but once you see her, you're going to recognize her. So this is 64, The Patsy. And then from 65, another 4-star film is The Family Jewels. And that is about a young girl who's an heiress, and she has to choose which of her 6 wacky uncles will be her guardian. Jerry, meanwhile, is kind of playing a normal guy, and he's her chauffeur. And again, he's a little too sentimental and sweet. And it's obvious from the beginning that she's going to choose Jerry to be her guardian. But the great thing about the family jewels is all the 6 wacky uncles are played by Jerry in different disguises. There's one of them, different makeup, different wigs and hats and voices. And so it's a real tour de force for Jerry as far as being really crazy and out there. Now, let's take another swig of this. Let's get to the big ones. This is the 5-star films, starting with The Bellboy from 1960. This is Jerry's directorial debut. This is really a pantomime performance by him. He doesn't speak at all until the very end. It's kind of silly. A lot of sight gags, a lot of jokes in here, you know, very thin plot line, him just getting into misadventures as a bellboy in the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach. Jerry Lewis, the entertainer, shows up as himself at one point in this film. And then Milton Berle's in here too, in a bit part as another bellboy. So a lot of the most famous bits of his films are in The Bellboy. So I would look on YouTube, Jerry Lewis, The Bellboy, and they're going to show you some of those most famous skits of his that are just classic. And then along with that, another 5-star one is The Errand Boy from 1961. And this takes place at Parimutuel Pictures, which is really Paramount, which made all these films I'm showing you today. And he is an errand boy. And again, it's similar to The Bellboy, where it's a lot of different jokes and sight gags and things like that, and a very thin plot line as he goes and runs errands at the studio and gets into all kinds of trouble. This one stars, interestingly, Brian Donlevy is the head of the studio. He's the guy from the Quatermass films. I didn't even realize or remember that he was in this one. Finally, his best film, I think, and most people would probably agree, and that's The Nutty Professor, and that's from 1963. And this is a Jekyll and Hyde story. Jerry's playing a professor. There he is there, one of his most famous characters, Julius Kelp. And he really likes one of his students, which is probably not a good idea, played by Stella Stevens. Her name's Miss Purdy. And but he can't get the courage to ask her out. So he designs a love potion and transforms himself into Buddy Love, sort of this lounge lizard, sleazy, misogynistic, sexist guy. And some people speculate he was making fun of Dean Martin. Some people say that's Jerry's real personality. Whatever it is, it's kind of fun to speculate, but doesn't ruin your enjoyment of the film. It's a classic comedy, really. And it's got Buddy Lester in here, and he was in one of the other films. He's a really good comic actor, but like a straight actor. And then again, Kathleen Freeman's in this one. Put it this way, the lovely Mrs. Kazdoy Closet is not going to watch a Jerry Lewis film, but she will watch this one. So that tells you a lot about the staying power and of the Nutty Professor. Now we're going to get into the extracurricular section. If you want to get a little deeper into Jerry Lewis, first we'll start with another little drink. Then I want to show you this Nutty Professor Collector's Edition. This one, I think, is out of print. I think I bought it for about 60 bucks when it first came out. I saw it on Amazon for about $150 and up from there. So it opens up like so. And there's a few goodies in here. Let me see if I can show them to you quickly. There is a personal message from Jerry Lewis talking about The Nutty Professor, his film. There is this booklet, which shows some script pages marked up with his notes and some photos. There's a hardbound book of the storyboards for the film, which are pretty extensive, actually. Here's the back. There is, of course, a Blu-ray of The Nutty Professor, 50th anniversary, and for some reason they included Cinderella on DVD and The Errand Boy on DVD. So I almost didn't buy this, as I thought we already have those, but I couldn't resist. So there's that. there is strangely a CD of Jerry Lewis phony phone calls. I like phony phone calls. I like what Howard Stern does with them. I listened to this once. I really can't recall how funny they were, but kind of strange they added that. And then this is interesting. This is called Being a Person or Just Feeling Better by Jerry Lewis. And it's this book. And what happened was when he started filming The Nutty Professor, he noticed there was some tension on the set. So he decided he needed to address that right away. So he went home and wrote up this book and had his sketch artist do the sketches for it. And it's very simple. There's just, one word or just a phrase on each page, just telling, how to act like a good person. Not get an attitude, and trying to build camaraderie on the set. Interesting little tidbit there that he gave to his people. Books. Now, if you want to get into books, we have this book here. It's called The Total Filmmaker. Pretty famous book. A lot of filmmakers swear by this book. I had it on my radar for quite a long time, but I was too cheap to buy it. So I was looking for a library, couldn't find it, looking for a used copy, couldn't find it. It used, no library copy, nothing. Finally, I saw it in a bookstore, I grabbed it. It's pretty good. What it is a series of USC film school lectures from 1967 that Jerry gave, and his voice really comes through, and you can hear his voice when you read these. Some of it's a little repetitive, some of it's a little too technical for me. It goes into pre-production, production, post-production, talks about actors, talks about editing, it talks about comedy. What really comes through all this is his intense love for filmmaking. It's unavoidable. It really comes through. Another book I recommend that's much lighter than that one is a book called Dean and Me, a love story that Jerry wrote himself. I got that at the library, so you can probably get that there too. Another book is King of Comedy, The Life and Art of Jerry Lewis by Shawn, Levy. And I'll try to put those in the notes on this episode in case you want to look for it. That's a good one too. King of Comedy, of course, referring to the great Martin Scorsese film where Jerry Lewis plays a talk show host. It was originally offered to Johnny Carson. He turned it down, and Jerry Lewis is just fantastic in it, playing against Robert De Niro. Another couple things I want to mention extracurricular-wise is the film The Day the Clown Cried. You can look this up for more details. That's a film Jerry made and never released. I think in the early 70s he made it. And this is about, he plays a clown who is in a concentration camp, and he entertains the kids in the concentration camps. It's notorious for being really tone deaf and really inappropriate, I'm sure unintentionally. It's kind of reminds me of Life is Beautiful, which is a film I really like, but I think that one did it more successfully. From what I understand, he does not want anybody to see this film until 2024. So hey, we're almost there, something to look forward to, right? I know the comedian Patton Oswalt got a hold of the script and was doing live readings with some of his friends, and Jerry sent him a cease and desist letter, and he stopped doing it. So there's a lot more about that. You can look it up, The Day the Clown Cried. Look it up on IMDb. There's a lot of background. Just another interesting, weird thing in the story of Jerry Lewis. The other thing I want to mention is amazing. I had the chance to see him live. This was in 2014 at a theater in La Mirada out here in Southern California. And this was 3 years before he died. And I'm so glad that I went to go see him. He comes walking out on stage, very old man, hunched over, sits in a director's chair on a little bit of a raised platform, and talk for maybe an hour. Some anecdotes from his life and from the films, showed clips, the most famous clips from his films, and did a little bit. He did the typewriter bit where he plays along to the music. It's always funny. He's always typing like this. Usually people are typing down below, but who cares, right? It's a funny bit. He did that, And, you know, I will admit, a tear came to my eye because I thought, here's this old guy, and he's still just trying to make us all laugh. And of course, a lot of it was nostalgia for growing up watching Jerry Lewis films. By the way, in this, speaking of growing up watching films, in this Total Filmmaker, the preface is from Nicolas Cage, who says, Jerry Lewis was my hero. And Jerry Lewis heard Nicolas Cage was saying good things about him on talk shows, invited him to one of his shows, and Nicolas Cage remains a huge fan. So at one point in the La Mirada show where Jerry was live, he did a Q&A at the end, and one guy walked up and said, asked for his reaction, that Dean Martin said, the worst day of my life was when I met Jerry Lewis, and the best day of my life is when I left Jerry Lewis. And almost everybody in the audience groaned. I groaned. It's like we know the stories. We know the controversies. We're here because we love the man's work. Okay, so why were you here saying that? It makes no sense at all. So that's my La Mirada story. Other things I recommend is there's an episode of the Jerry Seinfeld series, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, that he did with Jerry Lewis. That is great. Jerry Seinfeld says at the beginning, if you don't get Jerry Lewis, then you don't get comedy. And I think he's right. And he is such a fan. And Jerry Lewis responds really well to him, even laughs with him. And Jerry Lewis can be a really tough interview. That's another story. You can look that up on YouTube as well. Really cringy stuff. The last thing I want to recommend is the great Martin Short and his SCTV skits imitating Jerry Lewis. You can find them on YouTube. Check out Jerry Lewis Sings Dylan, where Martin Short is Jerry Lewis singing Bob Dylan songs. It makes me laugh out loud every single time. It's great. And you can tell he has a real affection for Jerry Lewis because he even says it's on Paramutual Records. And Paramutual was the name of the studio in The Errand Boy, so he knows his stuff. So there we have it, guys. One more toast to you. Thank you so much for subscribing. Feel free to leave a comment. Let me drink this first. Yeah. Now, where can you see these Jerry Lewis films? It's possible some of them are streaming. I really don't know. I would think a lot of them are available to borrow through your local library. You can always buy them. I looked some of them up. It varies. The ones I showed you are all DVDs, except for that collector's edition. That's a Blu-ray of Nutty Professor. But all the DVDs, they vary in price from $5 to not available. So this is only on Amazon, I looked. So you might want to do a little digging. I know there are some collections where you can get like 10 Jerry Lewis films for like 25 bucks or so. I think I've seen them at Barnes & Noble. So it's kind of all over the place. So you have to do a little digging if you really want to buy them. But again, like I said, these films have been around a while. Check your local library. Feel free to leave a comment down below. Leave a thumbs up. Don't leave a thumbs down. Subscribe would be great. Let's shoot for 275 now. Let's see what happens. Subscribe. Share this with your friends and neighbors. Otherwise, thanks so much for putting up with my Jerry Lewis obsession and love. And I hope you like this one. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.